Welcome, everyone. The Center of Excellence in Smart Construction is pleased to present this virtual seminar, Mental Health in Construction, What Can Be Done? My name is Dr. Wendu Oguda, and I'm the Center Manager. Please note, we are recording the webinar and all lines are muted. If you need help at any time, please send us a message via the Q&A chat box. Today's event will last up to 60 minutes. We encourage you to ask questions throughout the event. Simply type them into the Q&A chat box in the lower center of the screen, and then be sure to click the send button. The Center of Excellence in Smart Construction is committed to advancing industry-led innovations in the built environment that will revolutionize the way we develop, manage, and operate smarter cities. The Center partners with like-minded individual organizations and government entities to lead the transformation of the built environment and development of next-generation professionals for the benefit of the economy. The Center is a global hub for disruptive thinking, a platform for collaborative research, and a model for solutions development and stakeholder engagement. The Center's industry-led research and development has a focus on enabling technologies around three main themes: performance and productivity, sustainability, and well-being. The collaboration is intended to provide leadership in the future direction of the industry that will inform policy decision makers. We would like to acknowledge our 5 industry partners who have been integral to the development of the Center and our engagement with industry. It's now my pleasure to introduce our esteemed industry and academic experts. Adam Smith is the Managing Director for Polypipe Middle East. He started his professional career in the United Kingdom, trained as a piping engineer, delivering turnkey projects throughout the UK for various SME companies. Adam then migrated into facilities management of the construction business for large multinational retail clients. He then moved towards manufacturing, securing an opportunity to utilize his technical background for the Polypipe Group, the UK's largest piping systems manufacturer. His role then took him to the Middle East early in 2010 to develop the interests of the business in various markets, whilst being involved in supporting organizations such as CESC, Constructing Excellence, and the BRA. Adam is passionate about water and the future of green urbanization in the region. Professor Guy Walker is the leader of pioneering education in the School of Energy, Geoscience, Infrastructure, and Society at Heriot-Watt University. He's a leading academic in the human factors discipline and has published over 120 papers and 18 books. Human and organizational factors are key to safety, constructability, and well-being. He's currently working with the Palace of Westminster Restoration and Renewal Program to embed social technical construction within the UK's largest ever restoration project. Mike Palmer is Regional Health, Safety, Security, Safeguarding, and Wellbeing Manager at Mott MacDonald. As Mott MacDonald's Health, Safety, Security, Safeguarding, and Wellbeing Manager, Mike brings 25 years experience in his role, including 10 years in the MESA region. He's well-versed in working in high-risk environments. Currently undertaking a doctorate in crisis management and resilience, Mike specializes in psychosocial risk management. Paul Hendry is the Global Vice President of Health, Safety and Environment, People and Places Solutions at Jacobs. He started his career in construction and transitioned to HSC in 1998. He joined Jacobs in 2011 as Senior HSC Manager for the UK Buildings and Infrastructure region, and has progressed through the organization in various other HSC roles to his present, where he's currently Vice President of Global HSC P&PS. His passion is construction, and he has been involved in many iconic construction projects in his career across the globe, both internal and external to Jacobs. He realized that in order to deliver good projects and good work, that we needed our work first to be mentally healthy and thriving. Therefore, over the last few years, he has dedicated a lot of his energy to mental health. I'll now hand over to Adam Smith, our moderator for this evening's webinar. Thank you.
Thank you, Wendu, and good evening, everybody. I'm delighted to be part of your webinar this evening, presenting with industry-leading professionals in their field and the wider construction community. Thank you especially to the CESC team at Heriot-Watt University for your consideration. We're all living through unprecedented times. The past 18 months have seen all of our working lives transform so rapidly. As we're on the road to recovery, it feels the right time to be discussing mental health in construction, what can be or what should be done. The World Health Organization states there is no health without mental health. In recent years, there has been increasing acknowledgement of the important role mental health plays in our society. Depression is one of the leading causes of disability, and suicide is the second leading cause of death amongst 15 to 29-year-olds globally. Mental health conditions can have a substantial effect on all areas of life. It is estimated that depression and anxiety alone cost the global economy over $1 trillion a year. The construction industry is renowned for being a highly competitive, high-pressure work environment, an environment that has a high turnover of staff from project to project, and one of the largest percentages of employees that are separated from their families and support networks. These risk factors have increased significantly since the start of COVID-19 pandemic and the subsequent global recession. Our industry may struggle at times to keep up with an evolving narrative about mental health, where traditionally we have always placed an importance on physical health. We are hopeful that tonight's webinar and content covers key topics and approaches that increase prevention and provide awareness to some of the more practical things we can do to help deal effectively with mental health issues in our workplace. We will aim to finish on time. Some of you may be aware there's a small issue and a football match happening tonight. To help enrich our discussions, I would again encourage you all to use the chat box facility to ask any questions that you may have, which we will cover in our Q&A session later on. I would now like to hand over to Professor Guy Walker, who will deliver his presentation.
Great. Thanks so much, Adam. So thank you very much, everyone. It's a huge pleasure to be speaking with all of you today or this evening on such an important topic. And my job is to kickstart the conversation, and to do that, I want to helicopter in from altitude in true academic style, and perhaps give you all some food for thought on mental health in construction, what can be done, but also set the scene for some of the brilliant initiatives and ideas being applied in practice by some of our panelists. So, as I say, what are we actually talking about? So when we talk about mental health, we're talking about a positive state of mind and body. It's about feeling safe and able to cope with a sense of connection to people, communities, and the wider environment. But interestingly, levels of mental health are influenced by the conditions people are born into, grow up in, but importantly for us, live and work within. And in the world of construction, as Adam has hinted at there, we have a serious problem globally and within the UK, where I'm speaking to you from now. And these are the sorts of headlines we see regularly in the UK, but of course there are powerful regional differences which we can pick up on in our discussion shortly. But I suppose the key thing here is that the pathologies and symptoms may vary, but the root of it all is a kind of negative state of mind and body, a feeling of being unable to cope, a lack of sense of connection with people, communities, and the wider environment. And if you like, the habitat we provide for construction workers, the working environment, plays a hugely important role. And I say, if we don't get it right, then these sorts of headlines represent a pretty tragic waste of human capital. And here's the thing, we actually know more about some animal habitats than we do about human ones, especially those habitats that humans need to thrive. And perhaps let's take business as usual in construction as an example. And I realise I'm generalising here, but the idea, I say, is to gently provoke discussion. And I think many of us would agree that the sector is under significant pressure to raise productivity. There's often a business culture which focuses on the bottom line. Quite often there's increasing demands of compliance with ever more stringent safety and other standards. And all those things conspire to give us a high pressure environment. And even when those pressures can be managed in an enlightened way by a lead organisation, issues of health and well-being can be difficult to address at the level of subcontractors and other lower tiers of the supply chain. So it's not an easy problem to fix. Interestingly, the same productivity drivers which demand a focus on lowest costs can also create recruitment and retention problems. Low paid work and limited opportunities for training and development can lead to reductions in the quality of human capital at the front line. And here in the UK, a fairly well-known report recently, the Crossrail Strategic Review, identified the kind of business need, if you like, to empower teams and to avoid them performing low value tasks. As I say, trusting and empowering contractors. And I wonder as well, perhaps members of today's audience in different regions of the world are noticing similar kinds of calls and are reading similar kinds of reports in their part of the world. And I suppose the question really is, how do we actually do this? What does trust and empowerment look like? And what could it deliver, not just in terms of the bottom line, but to the substance of today's webinar, which is to do with mental health, of course. All which brings us nicely to the second part of this conversation starter. We're, I think, all acutely aware of the problem, but what do we actually do? What can be done? Well, I say, here are some thoughts for your consideration to get the conversation started. Now, in our work at the Centre of Excellence at Heriot-Watt University, we perhaps have a slight preference to look at it from the other way around, because when construction goes well, it goes spectacularly well. We can take projects from across the world, but if we look at, say, the London Olympics, here we have a project that achieved overall delivery on time and within budget, with a smaller workforce than expected, significant savings, minimal rework, and accident frequency rates significantly below the construction norm, and with a productive, committed workforce. Those are the kinds of outcomes we would love to see more of. But what's key, and a key part of the learning legacy for this project, is that it's actually the human and organisational factors that were instrumental to this success, but they're also instrumental to mental health and well-being. Those are the things which kind of set the tone for this kind of human habitat that we're creating within the construction domain. So again, this is a conversation starter, and when we think of designing different types of work habitat, let's have a think about what business as normal looks like. And in something of a classic case study, I wonder if you might be able to spot some similarities with construction. Quite often we see in manufacturing lots of lessons learned in that domain filter across to construction. And the same is true here. So the case study is one that was used by the car manufacturer Volvo, and they had a production line, a method of working that couldn't have been more procedural, repeatable, controllable, manageable, quantifiable. And I wonder, does any of that sound familiar? Also, at the time, Volvo were experimenting with new ways of working. The auto industry was plagued by absenteeism. People, especially young people, wanted to work in a car factory about as much as they wanted to work on a muddy construction project. Again, does this sound familiar? And likewise, the charts for quality, efficiency, and productivity were all declining. So what did Volvo do? Well, they created an entirely new habitat for people to work within. They spent £500 million on a socio-technical approach, which involved an entirely new factory, where basically, instead of a production line, teams of workers assembled a complete car in a dedicated work area. And rather than have the task split into small, unskilled, boring components, the new factory actually resembled more like a honeycomb. And all the sophisticated automation and technology was designed to support the humans within it rather than the other way around. But I'd say the effects of this socio-technical approach in this case were transformational, putting people to work in a different way, engaged them in all aspects of the work. It made the production process and goals of the activity understandable, and the employees became, as part of their job, involved in the customer's demands and in striving for constant improvement. And work intensity was high. Interestingly, the number of hours of labour needed to construct the items at these plants reduced by more than 40%, but critically, for the purposes of today's webinar, on well-being, a worker survey showed that 90% preferred this more flexible team-based approach to the more regimented production line approach, even when the pace of assembly operations was faster. And in fact, during this time, this particular factory was one of the most profitable car manufacturers in the world. So what if we took this socio-technical approach and the vast background of industrial examples and underlying science and applied it to construction for the first time ever? And that's what we've been doing recently at Heriot-Watt University. Socio-technical construction, as I say, characterizes techniques focused on creating the conditions for high performance team working. Rather than dealing with the symptoms of poor or declining mental health, it's about addressing the causes, providing a habitat within which construction work can take place that boosts health, safety, well-being, constructability, quality, and productivity. So as I say, the socio-technical approach is founded on these key principles, and you can see that they are potentially quite a powerful way for addressing some of the fundamental human needs that people who work on construction projects need in order to thrive and deliver the outcomes we want. And I'll leave you with the thought that the UK's largest ever restoration project, the Palace of Westminster Restoration Renewal, is probably the first project to take a serious interest in this new approach, and it's a great pleasure and honour to be working with them on it. And the reason is because a project like the Palace of Westminster exposes a new reality. Basically, we need the humans in this project to deliver the kinds of outcomes we want, which is a high quality heritage building that's going to last for generations. And I say we need the things that humans are good at. A final reflection. Today's webinar is called Mental Health, not mental illness, and the environment or habitat that we create can lead to transformational impacts, not just on people in terms of their mental health and well-being, but also on the bottom line. I guess that's the interesting challenge that lies before us. So at that point, with those thoughts in mind, let's together begin the conversation. Adam, back to you.
Thank you, guys. Thank you for that full and rich presentation, some very thought-provoking ideas in there. So if we start to the panelist discussion, I think obviously we've got members of the panel that represent large businesses here and have obviously instigated some projects and initiatives that are looking at mental health in their businesses. I think I'd like to invite each of the panelists to share, in particular, a project, initiative, some thoughts on what's happening in their own business. Paul, you're joining us from Jacobs, a global business you operate in different regions. I wonder if you'd be kind enough to share with you some of the things you've been doing that helped your people and your businesses tackle mental health.
Yeah, sure. Thank you, Adam, and thank you to Heriot-Watt for the invitation, and thank you to everyone for joining the webinar. Really thought-provoking piece from Guy there. And one of the things I was wanting to talk about really was that whole systems and people approach, which Guy spoke about. You know, we talk about, in Jacobs, about having our people thriving. I made the link when we launched our mental health program in 2016. I made the link between our mental health program, return on investment, and even our share price. It's important to recognize that people contribute to the success of the organization. And that was a key discussion point within my organization. And it wasn't the factor that got the organization behind it. The factor that got the organization behind it was having an enlightened CEO who came in and changed the whole approach of the organization, made the organization a place where people could bring their whole selves to work. We have, and I'll get to the point in a second, but we have many networks in Jacobs where we have our our PRISM community, which is for the LGBTQ+ community. We have veterans, we have Harambe, which is for our African Americans, etc. So we recognize that society is really impacting on these people's mental health, and Guy spoke about belonging. And that's one of the kind of key things that we've done, Adam, was we set up these networks, and these networks are fully subscribed. On the back of that, we launched the mental health program in 2016. And I think today, right now, we have actively almost 5% of the business, about 2,500 people who are practicing mental health champions across the globe. And in Dubai, as an example, we have a really effective charter in Dubai, people who are kind of dispelling the myth a little bit about mental health. You know, you can't talk about mental health in the Middle East. Yeah, you can. These people are proving it. We understand the difference from a cultural perspective, but these people are actually eliminating the stigma every single day. So we've done that, as I say, 5% of our organization roughly. Our CEO and the executive leadership team are all mental health champions. They've been through the same training, as an example, as a graduate. You know, so when they go out and talk to clients, etc., talk at seminars, they are talking about mental health. They're really proud of the journey that the organization has been on. And honestly, you know, we spoke yesterday in our pre-call about, you know, how do we demonstrate kind of tangibles and intangibles. I think you just, you know, a lot of it's intangible, but I think the vibe you get from the organization is this has made a massive difference to the culture. So what we do with that is, through our training, we talk about some of the mental health facts and figures. You know, Guy spoke about, you know, mental illness and mental health and the difference. And we are really, you know, that's one of the kind of key points that we talk about in our training is that mental illness actually isn't a barrier to success in Jacobs. You know, mental health we can work on, but mental health isn't a barrier to success in Jacobs. One of the models we rely on is the KEYS model. You know, we show people that you can thrive with high or low mental illness as well as low mental health. And that's been really pivotal in us trying to, you know, eliminate the stigma. This means that people can actually turn around and say, I'm actually languishing today, you know, help me flourish. And we start kind of having these conversations. And as I say, that's been transformational for us. And then another thing we've done is, and this is really important for everybody on the call, we've created this open source web-based app called 1 Million Lives. What that effectively does is you can have your own personal mental health assessment. We've had this trialed and we've went through testing with psychologists across the globe, and everybody is coming back and saying this is phenomenal. So it's really a check-in tool, and we use the Kessler Psychological Distress Scale, which is a K10, and we ask a bunch of questions based on, you know, how you're feeling, your psychological distress, your agitation, maybe some of the kind of proactive factors like how much sleep do you get, how much exercise do you get, and from that you will then get your individual kind of risk rating or plan, alongside a lot of the recommendations that you can, if you apply, it will get you in the kind of right track. Now, it's not there to diagnose a mental health or a mental illness condition. What it does do is just shine a light on some of the stuff that you need to kind of work on. So for everybody on the call, you can actually go and download that and use that. Your friends and family can use it. I found it really important for me when I was talking to my kids about mental health. How does a 50-year-old guy talk to his like 21-year-old daughter about mental health? Really quite difficult. There's that generational gap. So turning around and talking about how would you answer this question on this app, and then showing each other your scores. And it was from these initial discussions when we were creating this, I found out that one of my kids has got really bad social anxiety. And that was just through this platform allowing us to have that conversation. So I would urge everybody to try and download that. And we've got some interesting data on that as well, which I've just shared on LinkedIn 2 weeks ago. not got enough time to go through it on the call just now, but it more or less reinforces exactly, you know, what Adam said about the impact around mental health and anxiety and depression and suicide. It really reinforces it that we are in the middle of a mental health pandemic. Just a couple of other things just before we move on. You know, Guy spoke about systems and people, and one of the things that we've done is we now do mental health resilience calls every few weeks in Jacobs, and it can be a different topic. So the topic last week was around the LGBT community, and we had something like 3,000-4,000 people dialing into these calls every single time we do it. It gives people a bit of kind of respite. It lets people know that they are, you know, Guy spoke about the connection. It lets people know that they're not isolated, and it's been really great for us. Then other things we've done is we really now address mental health through our project plans, our return to office plans, and we also use it as a key metric for our leadership engagement. So our leaders at the end of the year need to demonstrate what they've done from a mental health perspective. So I think, getting back to Guy's point, we just need to come at it from all angles, people, systems, etc.
That's very good, Paul. Thank you. Some very sophisticated tools there, and I was privileged to see that, and some of the data you're getting is good. Mike, I'll ask you perhaps the same question. I know you're a resident here in the Middle East, but is there anything that you'd like to share, project or initiative that you've got going on, and some outputs, how that's helped people in your organisation?
Yeah, thanks, Adam. And I'll also say thank you to all, to Harriet Watt and yourself, Guy and Paul, for the participation in this. I think it's really important that we keep challenging people's perceptions in regards to mental health and the way we go about business, certainly in construction, and make sure that people realise it is okay not to be okay. So very, very similar to Paul, we obviously have a lot of similar tools. We look at what we're doing. So we have set out a vision, which is to create a well-being culture where our people are happy, healthy, and safe, enabling everyone to thrive. And I know Paul used that word, and really achieve their full potential. So that sits in with our company, what we call our pride values, where we look at progress and respect, integrity, drive, and excellence in everything that we do. And we're very, very fortunate as well that we also have our top management really buy into this and are pushing our regional, our group leads and our regional leads to make sure that we're taking the situation seriously. So just one of the little things that we've done, certainly through COVID, which has opened our eyes more and really enabled this conversation to move forward at a greater pace. Just over a year ago, we really looked at our wellbeing champions network across the globe, and we thought they probably weren't fit for purpose. So that they were great. We had people who were volunteering to be there for their colleagues, but what we realised is that actually they weren't being engaged with by the colleagues. So we wanted to make it better for everybody on our sites and in our projects and in our offices. Want to make them more approachable. So we really had a look at the gender, age, their grade, their role within the business, where they're based, the language skills, the culture. And we went out and said, we're really looking for somebody to fill all of these different criteria. So we're hitting it from an EDI point of view, as well as a mental health. So now we have a much bigger range of wellbeing champions that anybody can pick up the phone to. It doesn't have to be the person on their site. Doesn't have to be the person in their office. It can be somebody away in a different part of the world, and they're all being developed on a month-by-month basis. We have a group initiative where we have a wellbeing champions call every month, and we get third parties to come in, whether it's a psychologist to give us some skills. We've done some really good internal training in things like non-verbal signs of distress, holding difficult conversations. Digital well-being, obviously with work from home, and it's been really successful that we're seeing some of those figures coming through now. We're seeing that tangible evidence where our well-being network are now saying, yeah, three colleagues have talked to me this month, or on another site. I've had 5 of my workmates have asked me if I can lead something, do something, a social or whatever. So they're really making a difference to in certain areas. I'm not saying it's successful everywhere, because there is some cultural challenges that we're really still trying to get over, but that has been a real success for us, as well as accenting what we're doing on our positive interventions. We really opened up from making it very, very safety related to really including the mental health and well-being aspects. So now when we're looking at the ISO 45005 in regards to the COVID well-being, and the 45003, the new psychosocial risk management, and we're bringing in all of those headlines. And so, you know, the demands, the role, the change, relationship, etc. And we're bringing those in as key aspects that our colleagues can really report on. And that's making an intervention. So I thought my friend John Smith was looking down. This is what I did to support them. And again, we're seeing a tenfold increase in the amount of reports that come through our system, so we can make some form of measurement. Right. I don't want to go on too much because I'm sure our audience will have some questions for us, but you know, that's something I thought was quite tangible and you can relate to.
Excellent. Yeah, thank you for that. Thanks for sharing. Quite similar in some of the champions and the people element of that with Paul. Guy, conscious, obviously, Harriet, what you're part of a business, a university that has units across the world as well. So is there anything you'd like to add in that same theme? Is there anything going on with Harriet Watt that you're particularly proud of and it's worth sharing and highlighting? Yeah,
well, it's interesting. I mean, in some ways, we're quite fortunate. We work with the kind of younger generation, and there are some very enlightened views and approaches and attitudes which really sort of spur us to action. And just pick up on what Paul and Mike have just said as well, that idea of whereas perhaps, you know, early in our own careers there perhaps was more of a stigma. Today that picture seems to have shifted, and you know, and that's a good thing. On the more sort of educational side, we do make a lot of use of what we call sort of behavioural experiments, which is actually a technique from sort of cognitive behavioural therapy. We use it in a sort of learning and teaching context to get students to gently confront things which they might feel nervous about. So, for example, things like presentation skills or social anxiety. You know, we get them to sort of look at the belief they have about it, design the experiment they need to run it, and then create evidence for them to look back to say, actually, I'm better than I think. You know, my belief might not be quite correct. Yeah. So those sorts of things have been quite powerful actually in helping to build resilience and get sort of people into the workplace who, you know, are you know, resilient and can bring to bear all of their kind of talents and abilities. So.
Yeah, I think there's quite many facets to this, isn't there? And what I enjoyed about your presentation is the mention of a toolbox and how apt it is to construction. I suppose just to spur some further debate and get some, perhaps a little bit more practical than some of the more sophisticated stuff. I mean, if we were to build our toolbox from scratch, you know, what would be perhaps one of the most powerful tools that we could add in there that, you know, is fairly tangible to businesses of all sizes? I know we're talking from quite big businesses and we have nice budgets and generally some resource attached to these kind of things, but perhaps there's some smaller businesses as well that don't have these networks and people who are not perhaps working in the business 90% of the time. I wonder if there's a short piece of advice the panelists could give to people perhaps who are dialing in from those smaller businesses on those tools that they could put in the toolbox. Mike, start with you.
Yeah, so I think any assistance, what we've found really helpful, even on the sites, is that the non-verbal signs of distress, really looking out for signs. So to be able to give an aid memoir around, you know, people retreating away into themselves, or the opposite, because obviously we know fight or flight, you know, somebody can become more aggressive or retreat into themselves. So having a little aid memoir that you can give to your teams on a construction site is signs to look out for. Very cheap and easy. 20 things, 10 things, laminate it, put in everybody's wallet, along with the name of the local safety or well-being rep, and that's a very, very simple and cheap tool that you can use.
Yeah, great. Paul, any advice?
Yeah, I think there's about a couple of things there, and I agree with Mike. That's a good aid memoir, you know. But my plea is to like business owners, even the small medium enterprise business owners, is just treat your people well. You know, don't overwork them. try and make the conditions as good as possible, and get them really behind you, because you'll get much more productivity out of them if you treat them well. And by that I mean, like, fatigue is a massive issue in construction in particular. You know, a lot of construction projects are boom and bust. I was in construction at 16. I can remember being absolutely, like, knackered getting home from work. I can remember being knackered driving to work in the morning. Yeah. Look after your people and try to open up that dialogue around care.
Yeah, I certainly remember going to work in the dark and coming home in the dark. It's you know, quite a dismal scene in the winter. But yeah, Guy, anything to add on that topic in terms of the toolbox creation? Have you witnessed any power tools going in there that someone can choose to use?
Yeah, I mean, I'd probably say at the outset, I feel slightly intimidated in that my building experience is fairly limited, but I have driven a dumper truck, so and laid some concrete. So, but in terms of tools, I mean, I suppose there's two aspects to this. I mean, in here, in the kind of rarefied world of academia, our toolbox is like a big red snap-on tool chest with a whole range of specialist tools you've probably never even seen, but we'd love to share them. So I guess this is an appeal to the audience and anyone listening that, you know, if you've got sort of thorny issues, problems, things that are of interest, you know, we're open. Come and speak to us. There's bound to be someone who's looked at this before, tools in our toolbox which may be able to assist. But I wonder as well, and perhaps it's a slightly open question to you all, but it strikes me when you look back at the sort of tradition of construction work, it's always about teams, isn't it? You're in a gang or a crew, or you know, and I wonder whether that kind of team aspect perhaps comes under pressure with kind of more modern kind of construction practices. Perhaps that team aspect gets diluted or lost on really big projects. I don't know. There's something about the team, isn't there, that seems perhaps we could capitalize on and use, you know, to provide a really optimum habitat for high performance.
I think you're right there. I mean, we obviously spend a lot of time on task, very little time talking to the individual. You know, we have to take a step away from the task to talk to the individual. How many of us are there, you know, taking time to create teams and build teams and understand team dynamics? It's a training gap that we have perhaps in most organisations, that most of our managers are functional. We're promoted because we're good at the function. But the other skill set that comes with managing people often gets waylaid. So I'm very lucky to work for a business that does have some focus on attention, but yeah, it's all part of that process. So Mike, for you.
Yeah, maybe I can come back in on that as well, because Guy, it's an issue that we have seen, especially again through COVID. And sorry to keep coming back and mentioning the elephant in the room, if you like, but where we have seen where we've got well-structured teams, and in certain parts of the world, especially if I have a look at my teams in India, where it's very, very hierarchical. If one of those senior members of the team are taking out through illness, or maybe they've had a transmission case, so they've got to go and self-isolate for 10 days. What we found was that the teams underneath them initially were struggling, but as the pandemic's gone on and teams have got used to losing a member, the effect on them and the stress and all of the problems that they initially have started reducing, and they've now started to thrive and take on that responsibility and move forward. So it's a real double-edged sword that you have to have a look at that team aspect and think, what if the top lady or gent is taken away, or what if one of the team with the trades are taken away? How do we manage that and make sure that we're allowing the rest of the team still to thrive and move forward?
Yeah, I agree. Paul, just a short comment on that if you have them, and then we'll move on to the
Q&A. Look, all I would say is, you know, certainly my experience is being part of a team, it's much more difficult to actually admit how you're feeling, you know, particularly around your mental health. So my plea to everyone would be to try and get a mentor or a buddy that you can actually talk to about it, because that kind of team mentality can be quite challenging at times. So try and get a mentor or a buddy, then you can really talk about your mental health.
Yeah, good advice. I think it came out in the discussion. it's okay not to be okay, but we're all aware of the construction industry. It's perhaps not culturally, but okay. Well, thanks for that, gentlemen. Again, a full and rich discussion covering many broad topics, but I'm sure there wasn't enough time to delve too deep into them. So we've got some questions. There's been lots of questions coming through. I think this is one for you, Paul. It says, Jacobs have a training program, champions, network groups, an app, but how are you actually measuring improvement or decrease in terms of mental health issues within your organisation?
It's a great question. I think probably truly the only benchmark we've got right now is kind of cultural surveys we've done over the last few years around kind of the well-being of the organisation. You know, what we need to do is, so we've got 1 million lives, so we can measure data from that. But really, what we need to do is start to really drill down into like absenteeism, that type of thing. Really difficult to classify from a mental health perspective, because a lot of people will not say, hey, I'm not feeling the best today, I'm not coming in. They would rather say, I have a cold. So I think it's tricky just now, and I think it's something that we are acutely aware of, and we're working on that.
Maybe something, Guy, you could get into if there's a research project there to how we get those tangible bits of evidence through. I'm sure they all count, but okay. Anything else for the panelists to add to that in terms of the programs, in terms of measurability? I think we used a lot of the words about great results and, you know, tangible evidence, but Mike, is there anything measurable about your program? Are you getting good data? Is it working for you?
Yeah, I think I mentioned that we can measure positive interventions. We can measure how, you know, we have a narrative that's reported on a KPI every month, how often our wellbeing champions are engaged with. So we could definitely measure on that side. But we also did a study, and I know Paul mentioned absenteeism, but we looked at presenteeism as well as last year. So we did a small study within one of our teams in the UK, where we really looked at productivity over a period, a couple of months, timesheet entries, you know, all the normal the stats that you'd expect us to look at, and we did find that it was fairly shocking that the amount of money that we were wasting on the likes of absenteeism and presenteeism. And obviously that was a driver to make sure that we improved within mental health and well-being. So doing the study has really helped where we are now, but you have to really look at your organisation.
Thank you. Yeah, sure, and I'm sure everyone's different. Okay, there's a comment on the box. I don't think it's a question as such, but somebody would really like to work for Jacobs. So congratulations, Paul. I think you're doing a good job of articulating your policies well. Another good question, just looking down there. This is about the role of clients. So what is the role of clients, in particular, in promoting mental well-being in their projects? Open that up to Mike if you've got a response, or anybody.
Yeah, so Mark McDonald, quite often we sit in the PMC or the client representative role on a lot of our projects. And certainly we find now more so than previously that we are having more conversations saying to the client, we have to put X, Y, or Z in place now, because if we don't, then we're going to lose workers, and you're going to lose productivity, and you're going to lose skills and everything else. So obviously it's great now that the subject has gained so much more traction. But the projects we're currently on, they were probably bid for maybe 3 or 4 years previously. And so we're probably now getting to a stage where clients are now starting to really fund well-being and mental health projects, where maybe last year they were still saying, well, we haven't quite got that in the budget. As we move forward, that's getting a lot easier to have, but it's absolutely fundamental that the clients really buy into this, and all of us, whether it's your client representative, PMC, or the contractors, really push the clients to say, we need to look after our people.
Yeah, okay, thank you for that. Paul, any comments to add?
Yeah, look, I agree with everything Mike said. I think, you know, what I would say is that we've coached our sales team to have the conversation around having people thriving treating people with care and respect, and trying to give them the kind of best environment that we can put. Guy put up what Volvo done. How do we get that into construction? How do we get that world-class accommodation, particularly in the Middle East? How do we get that so that people are thriving every single day?
Yeah, conversely, I suppose I'd just twist that around a little bit. When you do talk to clients, is that an advantage with your business? I mean, is that a marketable value that clients, treat as an asset when they're engaged in a business of yourself, about how well you look after your employees and mental health awareness? Is that an important factor in making a decision, do you think?
Yeah, absolutely. It's about, demonstrating perhaps the art of possibility of, as I say, being thriving, and getting more certainty over your cost, your schedule, having much better quality if people are all bringing their A game. I think it's that whole art of possibility in selling that vision, Adam.
Right. Okay, just trying to cover off. There's quite a few questions here. Some we won't get to, unfortunately, due to time constraints. But there's one really, I think we've talked a lot about prevention, and we all know that prevention is better than the cure. But there's quite an interesting question that says, if some employee has a mental breakdown or depression, then how he or she should be treated. So yeah, looking at perhaps what happens when a problem does occur and somebody does reach out, what sort of help and support in your businesses and in the construction sector is there? Perhaps to Paul, to start that one off.
Yeah, look, I spoke about the networks that we had in like Mike's got them as well, and I still see them as quite reactive. Although they're doing a lot of kind of proactive work, I still see it reactive. Someone approaches a champion and says, hey, I have a problem. It's maybe too late. So that's why we created 1 Million Lives, so people can take mental health in their own hands. That's one thing. And within 1 Million Lives, as well, as I said, it's all open source. There's almost like a mini EAP full of resources for anybody on this call who can go and access right now. And then within Jacobs, we have got our EAP, we have got sessions with counsellors, etc. But if that all happens and someone actually goes off ill, what we then talk about is like a phased return to work and having conversations with them and try to support them. Guy mentioned flexible working earlier. It's just try to support them the best way we can, because those people are actually much more valuable to us at work than they are sitting at home.
Yeah, agreed. Mike, same question.
Yeah, well, the first thing to say is if you do have somebody who's reached that stage, then your systems has probably failed. But because unfortunately they've fallen through that gap, same as if somebody has a workplace injury. I think it's important, to be sympathetic, but also to make sure everybody around that workplace understands that mental health, stress, depression, all of those are what we call non-visible injuries. They are exactly the same as having a broken leg. They are an accident generally through work, and we have to make sure that we educate the people around them to recognize that they deserve exactly the same attention as anybody else whose injury you can see. So it's really having that sympathetic ear to that and making sure that it's not just that person that you look after, it's making sure everybody else doesn't attach a stigma to that, and make sure it's a positive environment to work in, even if you do, as I say, fall through the cracks slightly.
Yeah. Guy, would you like to add anything to that question?
Yeah, well, I guess just to sort of fulsomely agree with Paul and Mike, but I guess just to add as well that obviously when someone does experience an episode like that, it's sometimes quite helpful to think that there's a flip side to all these kind of mental health conditions. So perhaps someone who, I don't know, has sort of depression or anxiety, the flip side to that is that person is quite often the one who is hardworking, perfectionist, eager to please, all the good things that we need. So as I say, that flip side is, I think, quite important to bear in mind as well.
Yeah, agreed. It's not always visible, is it? I like the non-visible injuries. Just on that, just as a small point, obviously we spend billions of pounds and dirhams and dollars every year on the visible injury prevention in terms of PPE, non-trip hazards, education programs. On a par, where do we think we are with mental health awareness and the current revenues channeled by particularly businesses into that kind of education and awareness? A very short answer, please, gents, as we'll have to close up. But perhaps, Paul, if I could open that up to you.
Not enough, to be honest. You know, I think if we can address mental health, we could probably eradicate a lot of these slips, trips and falls, etc. So I would just say not enough. Okay.
Mike?
Yeah, same as Paul. I've done a couple of presentations on this to clients and especially to their safety managers, saying if they have a barrier because of a mental health issue, they're distracted, they're unhappy, they're tired or stressed, they're angry or dispassionate, and that leads to accidents. Mm-hmm. So you have to sell it in exactly the same way as we do physical incidents and control measures.
Yeah. Guy, any thoughts on that?
Yeah, well, just a quick one, I suppose. Just a wider observation that from the UK side, which is where I'm speaking to everyone from today, kind of R&D spending in construction compared to other sectors is exceedingly low, and it comes to kind of applying for sort of state aid for research and all the rest of it. You know, it's in low single digits. So the flip side again is there's some considerable opportunities there to increase that spend and do more of the things we would like to do.
Great. Well, thank you, everybody. Obviously, unfortunately, apologies to all the other questions that we couldn't get to. Such a broad topic, an interesting topic, a very hot topic in many respects. So thank you for the questions. Thank you for the ones we didn't get to, but thank you guys for your responses. I'd just really like to bring that Q&A session to a close with perhaps our final thoughts. Lots to reflect on, I'm sure. I've got pages full of notes here that I've taken throughout the discussions. But Mike, perhaps I could open it up to you to give us your final thoughts.
I'm probably just going to reiterate what I said in my last piece, that we have to get better at treating mental health in exactly the same way as we've treated physical risks. We have to have the same sort of funding for the control measures. We have to go and talk to the clients, talk to the contractors, toolbox talks. Everything that we do around physical hazards, we should be doing for mental health.
Good. Paul?
Yeah, I would agree. You know, my plea would be just to, whether you're a business owner or a colleague, you know, treat people like they are your family. Treat them with empathy, compassion, try and understand them and create that safe environment where people can actually, you know, tell you their thoughts and feelings. I think that's the kind of start to recovery when someone does that. And just kind of one last thing, Adam, you know, one of my team texts me and says, please tell people that 1 million lives is actually free. So it's free for everybody, just in case people in the call don't know that.
Right, okay, great. I'll certainly be logging on. So you did explain what 1 million lives meant.
Yeah, so 1 million lives is almost 1 million people per year end their life through suicide, where the pain has got too much. So that's really just a reflection of, you know, 1 million people. If we could touch 1 million people, I think how many people we could save.
Yeah, agreed. Guy, your final thoughts?
Well, I suppose just to reflect that certainly in our recent interactions in the construction sector, there seems to be a really strong appetite for positive change and innovation. And I suppose that has really inspired us to come forward with a kind of socio-technical construction approach, which, as I say, we're excited could help, I say, deliver some of the things we talked about today. So, yeah.
Mm-hmm. I think I'd just like to add that, you know, whatever we do, whatever part of the supply chain we are in construction, everything done in a company on a site is done by a person. I know we're raving about the digital revolution and AI and some automated software, but everything is done by a person. So even from a corporate sense, you know, making the most out of our human capital, keeping everybody happy, healthy, going home with all the fingers and toes that they came in with is is super vital. So thanks very much for your contribution. I'd like to hand back over now to Wendy, who will close the webinar.
Thanks, Adam. I just want to share my screen. Okay, so I'd just like to thank all our speakers for such an interesting discussion around a very important topic. And I'd also like to thank the audience for their participation. I just want to draw your attention to our next webinar, which is titled How the 3 M's, Material, Machine, and Money are affecting the progress of 3D printing in the construction industry. More details of this upcoming webinar will be communicated to you in due course. In the meantime, feel free to reach out to us using the email contact details on the screen. So that concludes our program for this evening. Have a wonderful day, evening. Bye. Stay safe and mentally well. Thank you. You may now disconnect.